Hey everyone, welcome back to Command Phase, the channel where we talk tips, tricks, and army tactics in Warhammer 40k. With 10th edition right around the corner, I find myself poring over datasheets and mechanics, trying to predict what will be hot in the new edition and what models to leave at home. There's only one problem: we don't have points cost yet, and therefore it's impossible to do this on a unit by unit basis. Even so, I do think that there's enough information out there to make some general predictions about what types of units are going to see a lot more play in this edition of the game. When you finally sit down to craft your list on launch day, here are a few unit tips I think you should definitely keep in mind. Alright, so what assumptions am I walking into this discussion with? The first assumption is that points costs aren't really that different than 9th edition. This might seem like a big assumption, but we've seen preview games so far, and in those games I didn't see a big difference between the number of models that were on the table in those games and what people could reasonably expect to field in 9th with 2,000 points. That, coupled with the way the box sets are structured and just Games Workshop's overall incentivization model, I don't really think there's going to be huge point changes this edition. I could totally be wrong and end up eating my words, but we're going with that assumption for this list. Alright, let's start with what might be good. I'm unsure right now about epic heroes. Anyone who's played 9th edition 40k for a while knows that named characters are usually pretty good, but they're not auto-take. Some armies like Drukhari, Custodes, Eldari, and the like usually would take a named character or two in every list, but in others their points cost made them hard to justify. Often more generic HQ choices could be upgraded to a similar power level, which allowed you to squeeze that extra drop or two of effectiveness out of the rest of your list. 10th edition seems to be a little different. While some epic heroes appear to be minor characters that offer a unique effect or two, others like Rabute Gilliman and the Triumph of St. Catherine are centerpiece models who are so good that you're likely to build your entire list around the power and utility they provide. I want to take a look at a couple of these datasheets to illustrate my point. Look at Gilliman here. There are a couple things he has going for him that are rare in 10th edition. The first is a high number of attacks at high AP, 3 or 4, and high damage. Power Fists, Thunderhammers, and other similar weapons are capped at AP2 this edition, unlike in 9th. So having access to a model like Gilliman who can basically kill whatever he touches in melee is going to be a big deal. He also has a trio of unique effects he gets to choose from each turn, and these are wildly powerful. Being able to use a stratagem for 0 CP or use Oath of Moment twice in one turn are such strong effects that entire army lists will be built around them. Abaddon the Despoiler follows a similar trend. Access to a high number of AP, high damage attacks? Check. Unique, powerful utility effects that will define the way your list plays on the table? Check. The same is true for Bellicor. The only reason I'm not sure if these models will be taken in most lists is because their points cost might be prohibitive. Though, if Gilliman is still 300 points, I would expect to see that dude everywhere. 10th edition seems to also have a lot of rerolls in it as well, especially if you get access to Oath of Moment for being a Space Marine, meaning that even though these units are certainly effective, they may not be survivable enough to avoid being removed in the first few turns. Moving on to something I'm a lot more certain about: vehicles. If you've been paying attention to the previews, you'll know that 10th edition is much tougher than 9th edition. Armor penetration characteristics are reduced, toughness is increased, and cover is easier to gain. No unit has benefited more from these changes than vehicles and monsters, who have seen such an increase in toughness that most heavy weapons wielded by infantry, like the previously ubiquitous Melta Rifle, now need a 5+ to wound them. I predict that without access to either lethal hits or the anti-vehicle keyword, most infantry units are simply not going to waste time shooting at these types of units anymore. In fact, the only thing capable of dealing with these types of units appear to be other vehicles and monsters, who are now sporting some of the most deadly firepower that 40k has ever seen. So if you want to kill a tank or pop a transport, you'll probably need a heavy vehicle-mounted weapon or a monster to slice it open. And that's not all of the bonuses that these units get. They can also shoot in combat at any other unit on the table, not just what they're engaged with. Tying up important vehicles in combat with chaff was a great way in 9th edition to shut down their ability to fire at more important targets, but that's no longer going to work. They also have a higher objective control value than previous editions, making them better at contesting key territory on the board. Vehicles can even do a ton of damage on the charge with the new Tank Shock stratagem, which allows them to deal mortal wounds, capped at 6, based on their strength characteristic. While this is powerful in any unit, this is a huge benefit to Imperial and Chaos Knights, who will often reach this maximum every time they use the stratagem. With all these changes in mind, I think it's time to dust off your Land Raider Crusader finally, and prepare for what many are predicting will be a vehicle-driven metagame. I want to also take a moment to toss some love to transports who have received all the benefits of other vehicles while also seeing improvements to their utility. Some transports now have the firing deck universal special rule, which will allow their passengers to fire even while they're embarked. This was a boon previously only available to open-top skimmers like Drukhari Raiders or Harlequin Starweavers, and seeing other factions get access to a similar mechanic, even in a slightly limited form, is thematic and exciting. Units disembarking from transports can now fire their weapons in the shooting phase, something they were previously not allowed to do, which should allow for some surprising new ways to deliver damage quickly across the table. Additionally, units with pre-game scout moves now grant this bonus movement to any transport they're embarked in, meaning they can get up the table early while still staying safe. Transports were already really common in 9th edition as a delivery mechanism for high damage, relatively squishy close combat units, and I would only expect their popularity to increase in this new edition. Coming up next is any Battleline unit. Anyone who's played 40k long enough knows that it's not the tank commander that wins most games, it's the humble guardsman. Generic troops, though occupying an unexciting role on the table, are essential for victory, as are the best units in the game at taking and holding territory, earning you those precious victory points you need to win the game. It's no surprise that in 10th edition this trend will continue. All the Battleline units previewed so far have the highest objective control values we've seen. On infantry, usually at OC2. While this means they're slightly more likely to be contested on objectives when significantly outnumbered, there is another newly introduced facet to these units that makes them especially tempting in this new edition. All Battleline units that have been revealed so far receive a unique benefit when holding objectives. For some, like the Battle Sister datasheet here, it's generating additional uses of their faction's unique mechanic, in this case Miracle Dice. Others, like these Gene Stealers, deal more damage when fighting near objective markers they don't control. These buffs are substantial. These Gene Stealers give full re-rolls to wound, which will really increase their lethality. These benefits, coupled with their improved scoring capability, are so substantial that you're not going to want to leave home without at least a couple Battleline units in your force. It's also worth noting that changes to the mission structure have made the primary mission worth the most victory points at 50. Secondary missions are now either worth 20 if you choose fixed, or 40 if you choose the more difficult tactical way to play. Victory points win games, and this shift means that you're going to want to take even more Battleline units so you can more easily get those points. Coming up next are leaders. 10th edition has seen a complete overhaul of how characters interact with the units they're leading on the table through the introduction of the leader keyword. You're likely to find this keyword on datasheets that previously occupied the HQ slot on the force organization chart in 9th. Leaders now join specific units, providing them with unique buffs that increase their power and utility on the battlefield. For example, this Primaris Lieutenant grants his unit lethal hits, which is 6s to hit automatically wound the target, and the ability to fall back and still shoot and charge. These buffs are significant, and depending on which unit you slot this guy into, this can open up fun, dynamic, and powerful play patterns. Changes to list construction in this edition now also mean you're allowed to take up to 3 of each datasheet in your army. Whereas in 9th you would only see 3 to 4 characters because you were HQ capped, in 10th the door is open for players to field significantly more. If the points cost is right and the buffs that leaders provide are significant enough, we might see armies that have a leader in every single squad. A Primaris Lieutenant is currently only 65 points, and if leader units are costed somewhere around that price point, I think we can expect somewhere between 4 to 5 characters, including epic heroes, in each list. Leaders are going to be hard to remove. Usually you have to remove the entire unit that they're with before you can even deal damage to them. But the epic challenge stratagem in the core rulebook helps you get around this limitation, being able to deal damage to leaders that you're in combat with by granting your melee attacks that a character has the precision keyword. 10th edition 40k seems to be an edition where you need to have the right tool for the right job. And if you want to take leaders out so that they no longer can provide their buffs to the units that they're leading, this is the way to do it. So you need leaders to counter other leaders, which is only going to increase how often they see play. Next up is anything that can mass equip weapons with the torrent keyword, and this one is a really big deal. If you watch the Combat Patrol battle report that Games Workshop aired on Warhammer Plus, you would have seen that a whole squad of 8 Termagants got removed from play by the brand new Infernus Space Marines just for moving too close. And this is enabled because of the changes to the Overwatch stratagem, which allows you to shoot out of sequence at any unit that starts or ends either a normal move or a charge move within range of their weapons. You don't even have to be the target of the charge anymore. You can target any unit that ends that charge move within range. The only way you can avoid this effect is to not get too close or just not move the unit at all. The normal catch here is that you don't often hit a lot of these reactive shots that you're using with Overwatch because Overwatch reduces your ballistic skill to 6. But that isn't true for torrent weapons, who ignore the hit roll entirely instead of automatically hitting with all their shots. These changes are going to make torrent weapons a nightmare in the new edition, as you'll now be able to slap a unit equipped with them in the center of the table and punish anyone who comes too close. It's extra good if the unit's relatively resilient against shooting attacks, and there are many units in 9th edition that could fill this role in 10th. Units like Retributors, Aggressors, the new Infernus Marines, Burner Boys, Grotesques, and so on. To illustrate how impactful this will be, here's the threat range of those units if you put them in the center of the table. That's a huge zone of area denial, and your opponent doesn't have a lot of tools to interact with it aside from shooting it off the table or battle shocking it so it can't overwatch you. If you can put 2 squads like this in the center for relatively cheap, this is going to be a key threat your opponent must tend to if they want to contest you for primary points, especially on those missions where there's an objective marker right in the center of the table. And rounding out our list, we have another unit type that will shut down your opponent's ability to contest the midfield, and that's anything that has the fights first mechanic. Now, I admit this one's a bit of a stretch prediction, as we haven't seen a lot of units with this ability previewed so far, but this effect is so powerful it bears mentioning. 10th edition makes a key change to the order of resolution in the fight phase. The way it works now is that all units that have fights first resolve their attacks, followed by everyone without the fights first status. If you made a charge move, you're granted the fights first status, meaning you'll usually get to swing first with all of your units that charged before your opponent can hit you back. This might sound similar to 9th edition, but in 10th there's a key difference in the order of resolution, which is that both of these phases always start with the player whose turn is not taking place. This means that if I have a unit in the center of the table with fights first, and you charge me, I will always fight you before you get to fight me. If these units are powerful enough, they might just outright kill anyone daring enough to charge them. Now, so far we've only seen this ability previewed on Trajan Valoran, an epic hero of the Adeptus Custodes, and even then, it's only a once per game effect. This is fitting, as the effect is extremely powerful, and would probably be broken if he provided it all game long. But I think that only helps my point. If other armies get access to this kind of tool, I would expect to see it in every list. 9th edition has historically been a game of trading units back and forth, kind of like chess, and winning the overall battle if you're able to do that more efficiently than your opponent can. While 10th edition promises to reduce this play pattern by making everything more survivable, efficiency at this kind of trading game is still going to be key to winning games. It's safe to say that if you can get access to these types of units, you should take them, and they should be in the center of the table. And with that, that brings this list to a close. I hope this has helped give you some predictive power over what will be good in the new edition, so you can start preparing your armies accordingly. Do you have a model that you love that's been on your shelf for the past 2 years because you just couldn't bring yourself to play it? What are you looking forward to trying out in the new edition? Please leave a comment down below. I'd love to know what you think. If you like this kind of content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. This is a new endeavor for me, and any help you'd be willing to give will go a long way, so thank you. If you really like me and would like to support my addiction to plastic men, please consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find the link below in the description. I'm new at this, so I don't have any formal Patreon offering yet, but those are coming, so please look forward to that. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, remember, the Emperor protects. Cheers, everyone.